Hi, I'm Bill Story of the Olderhood Group, and I welcome you to the continuing series called Money Matters. And my guest today is Ian Price, who is a renowned financial consultant in the UK. Hi, Ian. How are you doing today?
Very well, Bill. Very well. I love that introduction. That's cheered me up no end.
Yeah, there you go. So last time we did this, we talked about money management, etc., for let's call it the younger generation.
Mhm.
So I think today we're going to move upscale just a little bit, probably still not up to our level, but nonetheless, into the sort of middle age groups. So I guess we'll be talking what 35, age 35 through maybe 55-ish. Would that be a bit
Mm.
fair?
Yep.
Okay, so what are some of the issues that that age group is going through at the moment? Because as we've said before, the whole idea of money management does change as you age, as you get older. You maybe get promotions, etc., at work or stuff like that. Maybe the kids leave home and all sorts of different things. What are some of the top issues? Or top concerns, perhaps, of that age group.
I think, Bill, I think the starting point for me is the 35-year-olds, a lot of them have only recently would have got married. They might have only taken their first property for the first time and maybe having their children for the first time. Everything's moved from our generation like 10 years later. But Bill, so in fact, 35 is actually sometimes the hardest time for people because they are actually hitting what I call maximum expenditure period. So I think 35 to 55 is that real maximum expenditure period because, as we've spoken before, having children, which is so beneficial, so I'm told, is also so financially expensive. So that 35, age group, they're, I think, moving into what I call their peak earnings period between 35 and maybe 55. Yet the pressure on their income is also very high indeed, Bill.
Yeah, and I think you're right. It's a very important stage of life because as you say, well, maybe they're at their peak earnings or somewhere within that cycle they'll be at their peak
Mm-hmm.
earnings, but they're also perhaps at their peak expenses, as you correctly say. Buying a house and so on and so forth. It's an expensive, period of life, and then mixed into that is the notion that, well, in another 10 years, 15 years, whatever that may be, I'm probably going to be looking at retirement. So I've got to be really paying attention to my savings, my investing, and stuff like that. And we used to call it the shovel fund. During that period, perhaps towards the back end of 35, 55, the idea is to shovel as much money into your retirement fund as you possibly can. But so let's take the income side of it.
Yes.
Um, the peaking of salary. Is that a fair statement in that age group?
Yeah, I think so. That 35 to 55, absolutely definite, Bill. I think that's where you probably, you're strong. I go back to those days and just about remember that far back, if I'm honest, Bill. But you're striving to build your career. You're looking to do things that are absolutely right for the future value, future of your family. I also think, very similar to what you said, you hit this thing called tipping point, where probably you might have worked half your working life. Does that make sense? In that age group, 35 to 55, there's a fair chance you've worked half your full time in working life. So suddenly, I've seen people get to into, they say, 40 to 45, becomes a bit of a dawning realization that actually the retirement bit is starting to fast approach. So I think for me, it's very much an awareness period. Yes, there's pressure on income, of course there is, but starting to think about what you want to do with your money, short, medium, and long, I think becomes more relevant in this age group than perhaps any other age group because of what the decisions you're making impacts your family. And as we discussed, what you might want to do when you don't have a full time income coming in. Also, I think I'm starting to see trends whereby if I look at my daughter, who's 35, and some of her friends, they're really challenging what do they want to do with their life. They've been through the university, they've started their career, and sometimes, believe it or not, they start thinking, not being funny, Bill, is it worth it? Do I want to do something else? So it's lots of pressure around that age group. But taking decisions is, again, so important. We've said, putting money aside for maybe university for the children, putting money aside if you can for your retirement becomes very relevant. Although at a backdrop at the minute around the world where interest rates have been higher than they have been for a long period of time, the pressure if you've got a mortgage or borrowings on a property are quite immense.
Yeah, and I think the house issue is also very, very complex because, perhaps prior to age 35, give or take, you have bought a house, a first house is perhaps a starter house, perhaps. And then, kids come along, whatever sort of thing, and you now need a 2-bedroom or 3-bedroom. So you sort of scale up and maybe do. But, I think there's a point in the middle here, perhaps more in the 45 up range up to the 55, where I do think you have to say to yourself, wait a minute, are we comfortable in this house from a long-term perspective? Now, there may be reasons that you would want to move in retirement and whatever, I understand that, but I'm saying that if all other things remain equal, are you going to stay in that house, essentially, shall we say, for the rest of your life? And if so, you're not going to grade up. So therefore, can you really push hard to eliminate the mortgage before you get to the 65 thing? So it's a combination of money management on the one hand, but also lifestyle management. Do we want to stay here, forever, sort of thing? I think that balance is a very tricky, situation to be faced with.
I think you're right. I don't know if you've heard this expression, financial independence, retire early. And I think some people are starting to do that. I absolutely agree with you, Bill. I think what's changed generationally, and we should be aware of this, is a house is just bricks and mortar. That's that. And whereas our generation, it was about bigger. Actually, now is this house big enough for us to do what we want until the children move home? So my house, which is next door, because I'm in my office, is absolutely a fantastic family house. Is it a fantastic 2-person house? Not really. There's an awful lot of rooms we don't go to, and I'm not being arrogant, it's not that big, but there's a couple of bedrooms we don't go to. So you're right. So but fun enough, I've met people who said, right, this is the house I'm going to stay in. A couple of things happen. One, that decision is a good decision if it's right for them, because then what they do is, as their salary and income starts to increase, they have more net spendable as the percentage of debt against their income starts to reduce. Or they start to clear debt early, like you've said, which is this back to FIRE, like create your own financial independence, which is so important to try and do.
I think also, again, in this sort of age group, when we talk about savings, etc., I think the word changes from savings more towards investing, because, and I'm not playing semantics, I think just the concept is that, when you're saving, you typically don't save an awful lot month over month. But once you get into an area where you've got a lot more, free funds, as you say, then you have to start thinking about investments. Shall I run a portfolio? Should I do it myself? Should I do equities, mutual funds, whatever that may be? Yeah. The investing side of life takes on, a brand new kind of a thing, where you've maybe not been. I mean, maybe you need a financial advisor, obviously. I understand that, but I think, does it change from a savings routine, simplistically, and I don't mean that cheekily, but into a much more sophisticated, let me set up a portfolio or something?
Bill, you're right. Over the year or two we've been doing this, we've talked a lot about different things. But one of the key things is we've always said is the first thing anybody should try and do is create what you call rainy day money. If something happens, is there a bit of money set aside? We can have a great debate if it's 3 months, 6 months. It doesn't really matter what feels right for you. That is savings. That is there to be used for short-term objectives. Investing, to me, is when the time horizon slips, so you don't need the money for more than 5 years. So if you need it before 5 years, I think that's called savings. If it's more than 5 years, I think that's investing, where you look at other assets on every, stock, shares, whatever you want. So that's longer term. I also think part of this is creating a habit of doing this. Does that make sense? So my daughter has just had a financial review with our financial advisor. She has started to put money away, both short term and long term. So she's got a savings account for short term, and we've got an individual savings account, an ISA for long term. It's that type of logic to follow, Bill. I think some people try and do too much. In the UK, we've got something called Couch to 5K. And this is the idea: you sit on a couch, and how do you get to 5K? You do it in small steps. I think it's exactly the same with your finances. Do the small steps, that puts in the foundation for the bigger steps you want to take.
And then, of course, you know, one would have to bring into the equation, you know, the wealth factor, if you wish, you know, the equity in the house. And that goes back to what we were saying a couple of minutes ago. You're going to stay there. Can you get rid of the mortgage, etc.? Can you build up the equity in the house so that by the time you do get to retirement, mortgage is paid off, you know, you've got a sizable, hopefully, you've got a sizable chunk of equity, because that opens up another lifestyle issue, doesn't it? And we'll go to this one in the next series. But when you're in retirement and then, you know, you're facing estate planning, how do you handle it then? But that issue of estate planning, you know, further up the timeline is driven by what you're going to do in 35, 55 area, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely right, Bill. Hindsight is brilliant. The number of meetings I've been to and investment people say with hindsight, absolutely right. You know, if you and I knew what was going on in the world, we would have invested in, you know, in Amazon or Tesla when they were. Nobody does in reality. Very few people do. But so what you've got to do is in that 35 to 55, if you're building a foundation for the future, this is the key time to be building that foundation, I think. Like you said, that is when you're more likely to be settled down. You may have a partner. So that's where you really start to build this foundation, saying, right, what do we want the future to look like? I've been out to recently come back from breakfast in the UK with a mate of mine. We were talking about how lucky we've now become because we've both paid our mortgages off. So suddenly one of the big expenses has absolutely gone. That creates so much choice, because if you work out real costs of borrowing, not interest rates, how much you have to earn just to pay that, it can be quite significant amount of your salary is actually taken up. So it's really thinking about it, building your savings, building your investment, this 5-year thing, I think is so important in this age group, Bill.
Without asking a naive question, because it's got an obvious answer, but I'm going to try it anyway. Is this the time, 35, 55, is this the time when you need to wake up? You know, come on, you really need, you know, you've got all the bits and pieces, you've got all the jigsaw puzzle pieces, you know, the savings, the salaries, the house, etc. You've got all those pieces. Is this the time that you really need to be starting to think about your longer term? I mean, obviously your short term issues are you know, very important, understand? But is this when people should be starting to say, wait a minute, you know, I'm not getting any younger, I need to be thinking about this a wee bit more. Now's the time. Is this the time to be doing that?
This is the key time to have the plan. This is the key time to say, we've all partied, we've all done this. Hopefully we're more settled than ever before. We have to have a strategic plan in place that means that we can do what we want to do in the future, accepting that plan will change. This is what I keep saying to people, you know, if I go back to when I was 35, which is a long time ago, what actually changed was immense, but I didn't have a sort of plan. There was something there which is like the backbone of what I was trying to achieve, accepting you could get blown off, but absolutely right. But this is the time to sort of stop messing around, really nail the colors to your flat. You know, this is what we're going to do, and actually start doing it. Like I said, I've known over the years, creating habit is the best form. You know, if you start saving £100, $100, whatever, fun enough, after a couple of months, you don't miss it. Does it make sense? It's that initial shock, but then after a while, your income's your income. So my daughter, her investments and savings come out when she gets paid, on the day she gets paid. Therefore, it's gone. That's it. And she gets that discipline for doing it. Absolutely right, Bill. It's the key time.
So I think in summation, Ian, I mean, I think what we're saying here is that within this age bracket, 35, 55, you know, this is the time to take control of your money, take control of your life, which will help you take control of your, let's call them later years, shall we say, retirement or otherwise. The key is take control. You've got to understand. I mean, I know people who don't look at their bank account from 1 month to another. I don't know how they do that. You know, I mean, I look at my spreadsheets every morning, every single day. So I think that key point is you've got to take control. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. I would argue, you and I would argue, do that at any age, but this becomes more important now because some of the, you know, if you're in your 20s, the retirement deadline is years off. Suddenly, you know, you might, you know, if you start at 25, you might have lost 10 years. Absolutely right. And that's why, but also it's about having fun along the way, Bill. We're not, you know, you and I are not miserable people by any stretch of imagination. Part of that is to say, right, you know, I can remember that was the age we took our daughters on their first trip abroad. We saved up hard to be able to go to Disney. That was something we wanted to do. So it's not all about everything for tomorrow. It's about making those life experiences, but actually making sure you got the money to do it.
There you go. Summation, take control, and oh, that's right, take control. Thanks again, Ian. You've been listening to Money Matters by the Olderhood Group. I'm Bill Story, and my guest today has been Ian Price, financial consultant in the UK. Be sure to join us next time. Take care, everybody. Bye.
Thanks, Bill.